Welcome to all learners. The topic of today's lecture is human duties under the course Ethics, Theories and Applications. My name is Rinki Jadwani. In this lecture, we will be discussing about the concept of duty as defined and explained in the Western and Indian ethical theories. The main topics that will be covered in this lecture are: first, concept of duty in the moral theory of Kant. Secondly, we will be discussing concept of duty given by David Ross, and thirdly, we will be discussing concept of duty in the Bhagavad Gita. When we define the word duty, so what is the meaning of the word duty? The word duty derives its etymological meaning from the Latin word debitum, which means a debt that is owed to another. The concept of duty allows us to do the right thing for the right reason because it is the right thing to do. Duty-based ethics asserts that the central element in order to perform an action should be our duty and not the consequence of an action. The actions which we perform under a moral law are called duties. These actions are always in conformity with the standards of moral goodness. There are two types of duties when we come to define the word duty. So, these are determinate duties and indeterminate duties. Determinate duties do not demand any kind of moral excellence. For example, repayment of a loan does not require any moral merit. If one does not repay the loan, he or she will be punished by the law. Indeterminate duties, on the other hand, demand moral merit. For example, to save others' life while risking one's own life, to serve a sick man, or to donate money to the one who is in need. So, it is clear enough that these indeterminate duties do require moral merit, but not performing these duties will not result into any kind of a demerit. On the other hand, not performing determinate duties would result into demerit because these duties are performed under the laws and pressure of the society. These determinate duties cannot be called moral obligation. The duties which Kant is referring to are moral obligations which are unconditional and which are not performed under any pressure of the society. The next topic in this lecture is Kant's notion of duty. So, morality for Kant is grounded in the reason itself, and the demands of morality can be discovered through rational reflection. The conduct of a moral agent is guided by reason. Human beings are the rational agents having intrinsic worth or value that works as a presupposition of a duty. Kant believes that humans are the one whose conduct should be based on the intrinsic worth or value. Human beings are under moral obligation to perform their duties. Kant's moral theory is named as deontology. Deontology, or the theory of non-consequentialism, gives importance to norms when it comes to define the concept of duty. For a deontologist, an action is right if it conforms to a moral norm. Doing of an action has no relation with the consequence of that action. Consequentialism, on the other hand, relates the goodness of an action with the consequence of that action. In contrast to the consequentialist approach, duty-based ethics accepts that an action can be right even if it is not maximizing the consequence. It does not base the moral evaluations of an action on the consequences of actions. Kant's central principle of duty lies in the phrase duty for duty's sake. Repeat. The idea behind this phrase is rooted in Kant's maxim of categorical imperative. That is, we should always treat all human beings as an end and not as a mere means to achieve an end. The concept of duty is based on Kant's deontological ethics. The word deontology comes from the Greek word deon, which itself means duty or obligation. Kant's deontology is guided by the principle of unconditionality and universalizability. It argues that goodness of an action should not be based on conditions. For Kant, goodwill is the only thing that can be called good unconditionally, which is good in itself and not based on any other external circumstances. For Kant, goodness of a will cannot be founded in the consequences or results of an action. Kant says that reason is imparted to us as a practical faculty, that is, as one which influences the will. We have to then develop the notion of will, which deserves to be highly esteemed for itself and is good without a view to anything further, a notion which exists already in the natural understanding, requiring rather to be cleared up than to be taught, and which in estimating the value of our actions always takes the first place and constitutes the condition of all the rest. There is a relation between Kant's notion of duty and his morality. So, the moral theory of Kant is rooted in the principle of categorical imperative, which is the ultimate principle for Kant, from which we can derive all other duties. The demand of morality is to treat people as an end because all people are valuable beings. Treating people as an end would mean lessening harms and doing good to others with a sense of respect and dignity. So, there are two kinds of imperatives. The one is categorical imperative and the other one is hypothetical imperative. Hypothetical imperatives are performed to achieve certain goals. For example, when we say study hard if you want to achieve first rank in the exams, so this is an example of hypothetical imperative. We have a particular desire and we know that performing a particular action will help in fulfilling that desire. Duties, on the other hand, imply moral obligations. Moral obligations are not governed by any kind of a desire. Kant accepts all moral obligations as categorical. One should perform his or her duties regardless of desires. One should help people no matter what individual desires one has. The followers of duty-based ethics would agree that one should do the right thing even if produces more harm and less good than performing the wrong action. It is a duty of all moral agents to do the right thing even if it produces bad results. Kant's moral theory does not allow an agent to tell a lie even if that lie can save the life of a friend from a murderer. Since the act of lying cannot be universalized, we cannot make it a moral rule and act accordingly. So, we can say that the concept of duty of Kant gives equal respect to all human beings. The importance of duty-based ethics of Kant is that it gives us the reason to do the right thing, and that reason can only be our duty. To act in a morally good way means for Kant is to act in accordance of duty and for no other reason. It is our duty not to kill any person. But suppose if you did not murder a person, not because it is your duty not to kill, but because you were scared, so your action would not be called a morally right action. Here the consequence is the same, but the intention of not doing the action decides the rightness or wrongness of that action. When we talk about Kant's moral theory, so one important thing that comes is the distinction between norms and values. It seems prima facie that norms follow from values. What is to be done comes from what is good. If we have values, then we have norms. For example, if we can make an evaluative statement like it is good to help the most deprived, then naturally the prescriptive statement we should help the most deprived will follow from the evaluative one. Conversely, if we say that we should not do something, the necessary implication would be that this something is bad. For example, saying that it is forbidden to lie would imply that lying is bad. This suggests that in the last analysis there is a kind of equivalence between values and norms. If such is the case, then why do we distinguish values from norms? Do we really need both concepts? Are there not two ways of expressing the same idea? This is not as simple as it may appear, at least for three reasons, if not more. Firstly, all evaluative statements are not related to actions, whereas all normative statements are related to actions. Only actions are prohibited or obligated. The applicability of values is broader than that of norms. There is thus a vital distinction between the two. In a consequentialist framework, if a state of affair S is good, then it follows that we ought to promote S simply in virtue of the meanings of these two words. It means that good and ought are logically related. We find then an equivalence between values and norms. X has a positive value if it is to be promoted, and X must be promoted if it has a positive value. In addition to this, even if there is a reciprocal implication between values and norms, that does not justify their identification. Once again, a statement that something is beautiful in no way expresses an obligation. Secondly, certain non-ethical factors prevent us from drawing norms from values. It is good to clean the floor implies that it is an obligation to clean the floor, but only if it is possible to do so. Such a possibility now will depend on certain conditions, like if there is a vacuum cleaner, if the agent in question has the physical abilities to do it, etc. The idea that the ability to carry out an action is a necessary condition to the obligation of that action can be justified as follows. There is a close connection between concepts of duty and fault. Not to achieve one's duty is to expose oneself to blame, legitimate reproaches, punishments, or remorse. However, we cannot reproach someone not to have done something that is not within his ability, nor can we reproach him or her for an action which he/she could not but do. If we must act, then not to act implies being exposed to reproaches. We are exposed to reproaches only if we had the ability and still did not do it. Therefore, we are obliged only if we have the ability to act. It then follows that norms are not directly derived from values. We should do what is good insofar as we can do it. Equivalence between norms and values is therefore objectionable. Thus, duty-based moral theory of Kant emphasizes on giving equal respect to all human beings, providing a basis for human rights because it gives due regard to the interest of one single person, even if those are at odds with the interest of the larger group. The consequences of an action are not always predictable very easily. So, it can be said that the consequentialist theory brings an amount of uncertainty, while deontological ethics is more certain because it is concerned with the nature of the action only and not with the consequence. Though in many cases it may be possible that consequentialist framework would provide certainty when consequences are easily predictable. Thus, we cannot draw a clear line between these two theories by labeling them as providing certainty or uncertainty. The second topic in this lecture is Ross and his prima facie duties. David Ross admits three intrinsic values. The one is virtue, the second one is knowledge, and the third one is pleasure. but he also admits 7 duties prima facie. These duties are fidelity, that is hold your promises, reparation, that is to repair the evil you have done to others, gratitude, that is return the goodness you have got from others, justice, that is changes the distributions of pleasure and happiness which do not go with the merit. Next is generosity, that is make good out of others. Then self improvement, that is improves your virtues and your knowledge. And last is no ill will, that is do not do evil to others. Now Ross's moral theory is based on the deontological principle because he also adheres to the duties rather than consequences of action. But Ross departs from Kant's categorical imperative and the utilitarian principle as well, because he mentions several different basic principles which he terms as prima facie duties. The duties given by Ross seems more like features that give genuine reasons to do certain actions. These prima facie duties, later described by Ross as responsibilities to ourselves and to others. For Ross, our actual duties, that is what we should do, is determined by the balance of these responsibilities. Ross has not maintained any hierarchy among these duties, that is, he does not rank which one is superior and should be put at the topmost place and which should come after that. The importance of any duty is decided based on the context and circumstances of an action, and the circumstances may differ in each action. That may be the reason why ranking of these duties may be a problematic thing. So, 3 values and 7 duties. There is no direct and immediate correlation between the two. Mulligan in his book From Appropriate Emotion to Value mentions 3 other reasons in order not to confuse norms and values on the basis of the differences between normative statements and axiological statements. These 3 differences are: first, there are comparative expressions for values such as better than, worse than, but no comparative expression for norms. Second, there is a distinction between determinable axiological predicates, that is good or bad, and determinate axiological predicates such as courageous, coward, but no such distinction exists in normative expressions. Third, determinate properties imply determinate natural properties. Thus, to be courageous would imply to be put into test by fear and to surmount it. The reason for which equivalence is objectionable, the reason for which equivalence is objectionable here is that since several values are allowed, they can in certain circumstances enter in conflict with one another. Thus, it can be important to lie in certain circumstances in order to avoid the death of somebody. If so, then one cannot derive the normative statement, it is forbidden to lie, directly from the evaluative statement, it is bad to lie. A third statement has to be added on condition that no other value is injured. In short, there are at least 3 obstacles to the derivation of norms from values. These 3 objections are: first is values are related only to actions, second is a good action is obligatory only if it is possible, and third is an action having a positive value is obligatory only if it does not have any other negative value. Thus, the implication of values in norms does not seem to be convincing. However, it seems reasonable to say that ethical values are more fundamental than ethical norms. It is necessary to promote X because X is good. The opposite seems absurd. It is not that X is good because it is necessary to promote X. Therefore, intuitively, there is a priority of axiology over deontology. Even if one cannot necessarily deduce deontology from axiology, this thesis of the priority of values over the standards has sometimes been disputed, for example by Kant and by other philosophers known as prescriptivists. The distinction between values and norms that we have just presented allows us to understand why we can define ethics neither as a discipline dealing only with values nor as a discipline dealing only with norms for duties. This is because on the one hand, ethics is related to both values and norms, so we cannot restrict it to a simple theory of values or of norms, and on the other hand there are some values like Julie is pretty, this melody is superb, and some norms like do not suck your thumb, which are not ethical. So far we have discussed at length the importance of duties, how and why duties are acquiring the central seat in the moral theory of Kant, how Ross's concept of duty differs from Kant's theory, and the relationship between norms, values and duties, as this relationship works as an important factor in analyzing duties. Our next topic in this lecture is the concept of duty as given in the Bhagavad Gita. Bhagavad Gita starts with a dialogue between Lord Krishna and Arjun. Arjun, who is a warrior, a Kshatriya, in the battle between Pandavas and Kauravas, Arjun finds himself in a state of moral dilemma in the battlefield. The dilemma whether he should fight or not, whether he should perform the duty of being a Kshatriya or not doing any action and thereby save the lives of his own people in the battlefield. The message of the Gita is to teach why one ought to choose action and not renunciation from action, why Arjun, being a Kshatriya, ought to perform his duty, ought to follow his dharma, and that dharma is to fight selflessly. It is said in the Gita that a Kshatriya should not waver. The duty of a Kshatriya is not to waver but to indulge in the righteous war. The battlefield is the field of righteousness, the field of duty for a warrior. Duty or dharma of a Kshatriya according to the Gita is not decided by birth but by profession or karma. The importance of performing one's duty is emphasized in the Gita by saying that one should prefer death while performing one's own dharma to a change of professional duty. As it is said in the Gita, Shreyan swadharmo vigunah paradharmat swa anushtitat swadharme nidhanam shreyah paradharmo bhayavah. Meaning, it is far better to perform one's natural prescribed duty, though tinged with faults, than to perform another's prescribed duty, though perfectly. In fact, it is preferable to die in the discharge of one's duty than to follow the path of another, which is fraught with danger. The way of action, that is karma marg, is told as superior to inaction in the Gita. Inactivity is not possible even for a moment for a human being. Everyone is forced to act by their modes of nature. What is said to be renounced is the fruit of actions and all worldly enjoyments. Performing one's prescribed duty without attachment and aversion, it is said, your own Kshatriya nature will compel you to fight. You will be driven to do it by your own inclination, born of your nature. Thus, action should be performed according to one's own nature, but these actions should also be non-attached to any kind of fruit of that action. This non-attachment with the consequences or fruits of action is what makes this doctrine of duty or dharma of the Gita similar to the Kant's doctrine of duty, wherein the emphasis is also on the nature of the act itself and not on the fruits of actions. As it is said in the Gita, yagyartha karmano anyatra loko ayam karma bandhanah tadartha karma konte mukta sangha samachar. Meaning, work must be done as a yagya or as a sacrifice to the Supreme Lord. Otherwise, work causes bondage in this material world. Therefore, O son of Kunti, perform your prescribed duties without being attached to the results for the for the satisfaction of God. Thus, it can be said that the ultimate aim of performing duties in the Gita is the attainment of the Supreme Lord. We can see here that both empirical and spiritual aspects of dharma are enunciated, and both have their own significance, and they both are equally worthy and divine. Thus, the state of perfection is possible only through the path of action. So far, we have seen the concept of duty as an imperative. The word ought represents a fundamental experience of our moral conscience. One ought to do what one is to be done. This reflects the absolute form of the imperative of morality. In our next lecture on human duties, we will be reflecting upon the concept of justice given by John Rawls, and secondly, we will be discussing the conflict between rights and duties. Thank you.